Welcome back to the Data Science Hangout, everybody. If we haven't had a chance to meet before, I'm Rachel. I lead customer marketing at Posit. Posit builds enterprise solutions and open source tools for people who do data science with R and Python. And I'm joined by my lovely co-host here, Libby.
Hey, I am a community manager. I work with Posit to help foster our Hangout community here. And I am also a Posit Academy mentor in Posit Academy, where I help professionals do more with data by learning how to use both R and Python.
We're so happy to have you all joining us today. The Hangout is our open space to hear what's going on in the world of data across all different industries and chat about data science leadership and connect with others who are facing similar things as you. We get together here every Thursday at the same time, same place. Of course, not if it's a holiday though. But if you're watching the recording and want to join us in the future, there will be details below in the YouTube description where you can learn how to add it to your own calendar and join us live. Thank you so much to all of you here who have helped make this the friendly and welcoming space that it is today. And we are all dedicated to keeping it that way. So if you ever have feedback for me about your experience or anything you want to share with me anonymously, good or bad, or maybe suggestions for topics you want to dive deeper into, I'm going to share a Google form with you in the chat right now, just so you have that. But you could always reach out to me directly on LinkedIn as well. I love getting to connect with y'all.
At the Hangout, we love hearing from you. It doesn't matter what your years of experience are, or your title, or your industry, or what language you use or don't use. We really encourage you to talk in the chat, connect with each other, add your LinkedIn profile, introduce yourself, what you do, what your role is. If you have any roles that you're hiring for, or if you're looking for a role, please talk about that so that we can connect people to each other. And as a reminder, this is a community driven discussion with our featured leader here. So if you don't ask questions, we don't have a conversation to have. So there are three ways to ask questions, which you are all here to do. You can raise your hand on Zoom. We can just call you. You can jump in live. You can put questions into the Zoom chat. We will find those and make sure that we ask them to Michael. We will ask them for you if you put a little asterisk next to them. But if you don't, we will just call on you and you can ask that question live. And then there's also, if you feel more comfortable asking questions anonymously, there's a Slido link that is available, put in the chat. You can ask your questions there and we will also see them and ask them for you.
With all of that, we're so excited to be joined by our featured leader and co-host today, Michael Hausinger, a scientist in research and development at Dow. And Michael, I'd love to have you kick us off with introducing yourself and a little bit about your role today, but also something you like to do for fun.
Okay, thank you. Michael Hausinger. I'm excited to be here today. This will be fun. I sit in our product development organization within the consumer solutions business within Dow. So Dow as a whole is a huge chemical manufacturing company, materials manufacturing company. The consumer solutions business itself is mostly making a lot of silicone containing materials, as well as some other non-silicone home and personal care materials. The silicone side of things go into just about any industry you can imagine, from additives into shampoos and conditioners, coatings that get used in airbags, conductive greases, all kinds of things in just about any industry you can think of. And a lot of times it's a small component that makes everything else work in combination with other parts of a larger construction or formulation or something. And my role, I sit in our product development organization where we're trying to make the next generation of interesting products for whatever application we're aiming for. There's people in the organization working on all those different industries. But I've ended up in this sort of unusual role where I'm more focused on the digital space and helping the rest of the organization design their new products a little bit more efficiently. So trying to figure out how to make it easier for people to look up the information that they need to know as they're picking a raw material, as they're picking a formulation to try to modify, trying to make it easier to run calculations on some sort of test that my coworkers ran on some sort of analytical equipment. Maybe they want to do some calculations on that and they want to do the exact same calculation every time that they run that test. And so I get the opportunity to help them do that more efficiently and make the computer do some of the tedious things that otherwise they would have been spending a bunch of their time clicking the same buttons over and over again, which is no fun for anyone. And it's been a lot of fun the last few years getting to end up in this sort of unusual role, but it's been, I think, very valuable and I've enjoyed it a huge amount.
That's awesome. Well, I know that your role has sort of evolved from when you first started.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you could talk about how it's evolved, how it's different, and why it has changed, and maybe a little bit about Academy, because I know that you have
Right.
been through a very long journey with Academy. And I will preface as an Academy mentor and say Academy is a cohort-based learning program where you are with a group, you learn R or Python programming in R, and there are also sometimes apprentice mentors. The people in the group are called apprentices, and there's also sometimes an apprentice from whatever company or group it is who is helping on the inside to teach. So with all of that as context, if you could talk a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I started off, I'm a chemical engineer by training, and the first 10 years or so that I was working for the company, I was doing fairly standard chemical engineering type things. I was doing lab experiments where we would try to figure out how to improve the quality on some existing product, try to figure out how to make more material or make material faster in our existing assets, um, try to figure out what was important if we're scaling up a brand new material into larger and larger pieces of equipment and making sure that the quality stays good, all of those sorts of things. Then was in our product development world for a bit, also looking at what type of molecule we're trying to make, what structure of a molecule that's going to hit some sort of target. And over all of that time,
Sorry, somebody
over
unmuted on
yep.
accident.
Over all of that time, I would say I did not do anything programming related. I did some things in Excel all the time that were pushing the boundaries of what Excel is good at, but it was all sort of more standard non-programming type tools. And in 2021, I got asked if I wanted to participate in Posit Academy by some of my coworkers here. I see at least one of those is on the call already, which is great. And I was able to join that and start learning some tools. And it was really good timing of when I was asked if I wanted to participate there, because I had some things that I knew were very inefficient, the ways that I knew how to run those calculations. We were trying to put together a new version of some databases about the properties of ingredients that we might use when we're developing a new product. And the way that we were calculating out all this information would have been extremely tedious if we didn't start using some sort of programming tools. And so the timing was very fortunate that things lined up well. And I had some programming background from many years ago as a college student. I think just about every engineer by training has to have a little bit of a introduction to programming. So I at least knew some of the concepts of what programming can do, but it had just sort of been a class and I took the class and I finished the class, and then I was done with that language. It was some C++ and MATLAB at the time. Like, okay, I finished that class. I never am going to see these two languages again. And then maybe see a couple other semi-programming type tools through other engineering classes. And then I was done until I got the opportunity to start learning R in Academy. And it immediately clicked. So the way Academy is structured, you go through a set of lessons. For me, it was a great setup as we went through the lessons, and it gives you a lot of the things that you're likely to do wrong when you're learning some of the functions. The places where, oh, this doesn't work properly because you forgot to put a text string in quotes. This doesn't work properly because you put the comma in the wrong place. Can you fix it? That sort of thing. And the structure just worked very well. And then part of the structure also is that you're very quickly working on a project that some of my coworkers in Dow had put together some data on molecular weight distributions of polymers, which is a very familiar set of data to me. Now, not with those specific experiments or whatever, but I know that type of data. And so I was very quickly making some graphs that made sense to me and so forth. And then you go through Academy with a cohort of around half a dozen people who are all going through the lessons at the same time. And you are all challenged to do an extension of recreating something with your target data set, where you go off on a little bit of a tangent of something that's interesting to you, whether that's changing the formatting on a plot or making, I don't know, a new calculation on a new column in a data table or whatever it is. And hearing all the different types of things that everyone else in the group was coming up with was really helpful as well for me, because again, it's a bunch of people who do similar types of things to what I do, and everybody was constantly coming up with different ideas of what to do with the data set. And so whatever somebody else came up with was something that I probably would have wanted to know how to do a month later. I just hadn't thought about it yet. And so that was a very nice structure. So I've gone through that. That was when I first got into programming and realizing that it was something that could be very valuable for me on a daily basis, as I did a lot of analysis of experimental work in my world. And I haven't looked back. So I quickly got to become one of these apprentice mentors and have helped out with a couple of cohorts coming through, and keep learning all the time from questions that all the students are asking. They ask great questions that I hadn't gotten to yet. And then pretty soon I'll be passing that along as a friendly tip when somebody asks, hey, what about this? Oh, I remember that because so-and-so asked that last time.
I love that. I think we have a few people who are accidentally unmuting. So if you're calling in from a phone, just a heads up to just watch when you when you dial in. But I see there's a bunch of people who are asking about Academy, and I didn't want to make it all about Academy. We love talking about Academy as well. But if you ever want to chat more with our team about it, I'm going to just share the link to the Academy page in the chat, and you can schedule time to talk with our team. But just to, at a high level, share, it's offered by Posit, so it's a mentor-led apprenticeship, and then people within individual organizations like Michael can also become mentors for their own organization. And so if Isabella doesn't mind grabbing the Dow customer spotlight, I think that would be awesome to share as well, because Dow recently shared their story in using Academy and Posit Team as well. But on the Excel piece, I was curious, Michael. So when I was in my first job out of school, I was using Excel a bit, and I had never even come across R and Python before. And now looking back, I'm like, wow, I should have been looking into that. So how did you know when you were at the upper end of what Excel was best for?
Um, so there was one particular worksheet that I remember that I built in Excel, and it did what I wanted to, but I knew immediately that I was going way past what Excel was designed for. And it was something where I was trying to simulate um, something about some functional group reacting on a polymer chain. And I had set this thing up where basically each column of the spreadsheet was like 1,000 rows or something, and each column was like one step in the reaction as it continued with just random number related stuff. And so I would have a column with some information in it, and then I'd pick a random number and select the correct spot in that column for like where the reaction happens. And then the next column is, okay, one reaction happened. Now I'm at two reactions. Where's it going to occur? And so forth. And I'm just combining all this text together. Um, and so I ended up with this just ridiculous spreadsheet of like, it gives me one number, and I think it was like a few thousand rows long and a few thousand columns wide, where each column was like one step in the reaction. And it was all trying to calculate a number. Like, no, this is bad. This is not the way to do that. So then, like 2 weeks into Academy, which was sort of around the same time, um, I could calculate the same thing in whatever 10 lines of R code. And that was a lot more efficient. But the other real signal that I've gotten with Excel is that there's a lot of stuff that I've done with various lookup functions and various count ifs, average ifs, max ifs sort of stuff, which are some really powerful functions in Excel that get a little bit memory intensive. And so if you have a long enough spreadsheet that you're using some of these things on, it might take a few minutes to calculate. And that's a good sign that you're definitely pushing the boundaries of what Excel can handle.
Yep, I think that's a good signal. As someone who used to use Solver in Excel, I don't know if anybody has ever used linear programming Solver in Excel. You're like, wow, it's sitting there forever. Um, I have
Very, very useful tool,
it
but
is no, it gets the work done,
yeah, there's
right? But
probably
then
better ways.
you have signals. It's nice also, you were mentioning random processes, being able to set seeds inside of R and replicate your random processes was a big turning point for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I have a great question here in the chat from Mauro. Do you want to unmute and ask that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Michael, for being
Thank
here.
you.
I'm someone super interested in learning and teaching too. So I'm curious to hear your experience about the format of Posit Academy, what you think was, kind of the thing that had the most impact in your learning, and if you can compare that with more traditional formats that you had experienced before.
Yeah. So I really liked the format because it quickly gave me enough tools to start making graphs. And to me, analysis and being able to look at a graph is a much better way to convey information than anything with just table manipulation type stuff. And so I think week 2 of Posit Academy, we were immediately making graphs, and that helped a lot. And then I could start tinkering with things on what the format there was. My favorite part about Academy as a whole, though, was that it gave this sort of, it forces you to start exploring things on your own by the way that you go through the lessons, and it's got the, well, try this, this thing's broken, try to fix it, all that sort of stuff, which is fairly standard, I think. But then the prompt to work in a group, simultaneously going through those lessons and try to recreate something and then go beyond the initial target and say, you have to do something else, but it's up to you exactly what that is. And then talk about what you did and what you found out. That was really valuable to me, and I haven't encountered that in a lot of the types of classes that I had encountered in the past. Maybe that's more common. Like I said, I'm not trained as a computer scientist or whatever. So there's a lot of different styles of classes out there. But the fact that you get something where it's not even like there's multiple correct answers, there's an infinite number of correct questions to even try to answer was really valuable in my perspective. It was a format that worked well for me. I can't say that it works well for everybody, but it certainly worked well for me and a lot of other people around here. Thank you.
I love that. And I love to see how many educators there are in the chat as well. Michael, something that was really powerful to me in one of our prep calls is when we were talking around career advice. And I thought it'd be good to ask that one a little bit earlier today. And I was wondering, could you share a piece of career advice that's been meaningful for you, whether it's something you've received or that you've given others?
Sure. But when people ask me about career advice, the first thing I'll say is I don't really know how to advise somebody to end up in a role like mine because I wasn't trying to get into a role like mine and it didn't really exist at the time. But what I did do is that I kept track of things that I enjoy doing. And if you can find a match between things that you enjoy doing and are good at and things that other people find valuable but have no interest in doing, you're probably in a really good spot. So I enjoy a lot of this data manipulation type stuff. I enjoy putting together complicated graphics and so forth. There's a lot of people who really want absolutely nothing to do with some sort of computer related programming tools and would find it extremely tedious to try to put together a database of information or working through all the bugs of formatting of text or even a graphic or designing the table that makes the graphic and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of people would find that extremely tedious and not so interesting. But I felt a lot of pull from people who wanted the finished product, wanted a finished system where they could search through information or make a clean graphic or whatever it is, do their lab data analysis more efficiently, whatever it is. And I enjoyed the process of making those sorts of tools. And so it's worked out well as a nice fit together between those two things.
Awesome. Thank you. Curtis, I know you have a question. Did you want to hop in here before you have to go? I know he's got to drop off at the half hour here.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for letting me cut the line a little bit. What Michael, you just told a nice story about how like just kind of sharing kind of prototype initial work with students led to great feedback and, put you on a good path to improve the analytics and learning new methods and that sort of thing. And then I'm not totally sure I heard this correct, but like my understanding of your role is you basically collaborate with a ton of different teams and provide them analytic services, like various services. In my experience, that often means there's just, often a ton of different collaboration styles that you have to work with, which can be a challenge. So I actually, on the core question of like sharing collaboration on the prototype stage to, maintaining, like oftentimes people build shiny apps that need to be maintained for years, or, regular reports or even just answering questions with a new data set. So I was just kind of curious if you had broad tips and tricks, best practices, whatever you want to call it, for how to have success in that type of environment, which sounds pretty challenging to me, but also is like a core way that data scientists can provide tons of value to orgs like DAO. Yeah.
Sure. So, yeah, there's a lot of different types of questions that you might get asked, and that will have varying degrees of how easy they are to answer and how easy it is to build some sort of shiny app or whatever it is. And one of the things that I've learned is it really helps if you have the ability to sit down with somebody, have them hand you the start of their data, whatever it is, and if they can just sketch out well, this is what I want it to look like, and maybe a little bit of what the math is in between, then you can start putting together a first version. And if I have a first version, I always like to just hand a shiny app to somebody and say, try this, let me watch. Because the first thing that they're going to go try to click on tells you a lot about what they actually want to be doing. So if I hand somebody a web page and they go, it takes them 3 tries to click on the right thing, okay, I need to either label things differently or design things differently or whatever. And so just watching the way that somebody interacts with the original data or the tool that you've tried to put together goes a very long way. And a lot of times it's not too much effort to redesign the display of something. Usually it's the calculations and the import and so forth that are the hard part. It's the data cleaning and the import and the math that takes more effort. And then if you just tweak the display so that your graph switches the axes or switches from a bar plot to a scatter plot or whatever it is, that makes life a lot easier and gives the real answer that somebody wanted. So if you can get a quick prototype out there and let them look at it, that goes a very long way.
I agree. Quick wins are important, right? Well, I have got a question in the chat from Sonia, but it's got an asterisk next to it, so I'm going to ask it. And it is, what are some of the helpful or not helpful things that you hear from people when they need a project? And she said, I know this is a super broad question, but any kind of background information would be super helpful.
Sure. So the most helpful thing to me is having a good understanding of what format the underlying data actually is part of. If somebody says, well, I want to take all this information and I want to put it in a more structured database, or I want to make a graph out of it or whatever, I want to be able to see some of like a representative set of the files that everything's sitting in right now. So that I can tell, okay, how consistent is the naming of your files? How consistent is the naming of what's going to end up in a column? Is it a bunch of paragraphs of text that have pieces of information in them? That's going to take a lot of work if we're actually going to turn that into tables. Or maybe it's all sitting in some sort of consistent analytical output that's a spreadsheet, but is very non-tidy, to use programming terminology here. If it always comes out the same way, you can probably do something with it. And so just that first glance of seeing what the data looks like is huge. Some of the non-helpful things, I'm always a person who likes as much information as possible. So there's not a lot that's negatively a negative if they tell me something. I will also say that understanding the value in terms of at least how much time it takes for somebody to do whatever they're doing right now and how many people would benefit from a new tool, that's also huge. If you know that the same tool is going to be useful for a couple dozen people, that's a lot better than if you're designing it specifically for the one person. But if it's one person who spends an hour a day doing the exact same data cleanup or whatever it is, it it's probably worth it to speed that process up. And a lot of times those people will then a few months or years down the line say, oh, I have this other idea about something. And whether you have time or not, that might be the prompt for them to at least be headed towards learning some sort of programming tool or improving the communication with how to make a request for some sort of programming tool, because they've thought through the, oh, well, it needs to look like this, and these are some of the if-then statements about how I'm going to go about running my calculation.
I see. Well, I just want to say I love seeing how the DAO team supports each other and then the community that exists within DAO. And I was seeing a few comments from Tony in the chat and maybe a question. So Tony, I just wanted to ask you if there was a specific question or project that you were referring to that you wanted us to chat about. And if you want to ask that to Michael.
Oh, I dropped like 5 comments in the
Yeah,
chat.
I couldn't keep track of which one. So whichever one is for it.
I just wanted to mention that Michael actually led a visualization workshop. That was one thing, which was really awesome. So he really got into visualization after Academy. It was really great. I attended it. And then the project I wanted Michael to touch on, if anyone wanted to learn, was about his breaking down of binary file formats, because it seems like, why would you be doing that and why would you use R for that? But Michael actually figured out a really great way to do it and made it accessible for everyone with a Shiny app. And so you might not think Shiny has a use for breaking down binary file formats, but it turns out that is actually not true. It's actually pretty good for that. So it's not.
So, okay, so a couple things. So on the visualization thing, I will say one of my favorite Shiny apps that I've ever put together was something that I used in this visualizations training, which the concept there was, I liked running a training in the past where in person, I could just hand out a folder to everyone in the room, say, open this in a minute. I'm going to put a question up on the board about the things that's in your folder. It's got one sheet of paper. It's got some data in there. Answer this question. I don't know, which catalyst is best at having high conversion under these circumstances for the data that's in your folder. And just raise your hand when you know the answer. And what I didn't tell them is that there were about a dozen different possibilities of, some people got bar graphs, some people got scatter plots, some people got a table, some people got whatever. And so some people would just raise their hand in 5 seconds because they got an immediate answer from their scatter plot or something. Some people would still be staring at their text 30 seconds later going, why do I feel dumb? Everyone else is raising their hand and I can't answer this question. What am I missing? Well, you just got unlucky with a data format that wasn't optimized for this situation. And so I put together a Shiny app that does the same thing. It's just a web link. You click on the link and it's got a random number generated in the background that says which of these dozen possible data displays is going to load when you load the page. And so I could run some of these visualization trainings online now, or just drop a link in the chat, and it looks very unsuspicious for everybody to be clicking on the same link and know that they're clicking on the same link. That was a lot of fun. In terms of the binary file stuff, so a lot of different analytical instruments have their own system of how things get categorized or get saved. And there's a lot of stuff out there where a particular file format is just a wrapper around some other file format. So a .xlsx file is actually a zip file. You can change it to a .zip manually on your computer and unzip the thing and find a bunch of XML pages and stuff in there, which is always fun to find the pages and the graphics and so forth. And all these Microsoft file formats. And there's a handful of file formats out there that we use regularly that we wanted to dig into. A lot of those actually have information online where somebody has already published a parser, at least to some extent, and sometimes it's even a public domain file format where they've described all that information. But if somebody has just published a parser online, it's not always complete. Maybe there were some things that they missed when they were putting things together. And so the ability to dig around in there has been useful in, well, it's nice to start with Excel files if you have those, or CSVs or whatever else, but sometimes you can't do that, and it's helpful to make some tweaks to other file formats coming in, which are structured, which goes a long way.
Thank you. Brooks, I see you had a question in the chat, and you mentioned some of the work that you're doing, so that'd be great to have you jump in and ask that.
Okay. There's an answer already from Tony that might have gotten us to it, but I asked whether your dashboards or Shiny apps are mostly for internal use, whether you've had to grapple with the challenges of convincing people up above to let you use something external facing when they want you to stay in, for example, I don't know what it's like for you, but they really want us to stay in the Microsoft ecosystem because that's the way they get about security. And they're like, well, you can do that in Power BI. So I have resistance where I work,
Yes.
and I haven't worked here very long, so I don't have a lot of credibility for pushing against that resistance.
Yes, that's a great question. It has been much easier for me because I'm making things that are for internal use so far.
Yeah.
We have a sizable organization that is in charge of our Dow.com site, and everything gets more complicated if it needs to be external facing, because we have all this branding that's very important to a company like ours, to make sure that it's got the right formatting and the right color scheme and so forth to fit with everything else Dow. And when you're just putting together a smaller type of tool for something internal, you don't have to worry about that to the same extent, which is nice. Now, on the other side, though, I will say we have a number of things that we're working on pushing towards external facing tools, and the ability to put together a Shiny app or a Dash app or a Streamlit app or whatever it may be, and say, this is what I want it to look like, this is the functionality I want, etc., I think is really valuable to somebody who's more working on the true web interface for the company, to say, okay, well, maybe I'm going to write that in a different suite of tools, but I can visibly see all the functionality that I want to incorporate, and that the people using it find important. And I think that speeds up the process and requires fewer iterations of the back and forth with, hey, here's all of our requirements. Oh, shoot, we forgot this requirement because we thought it was obvious. Now, can you incorporate that? Having a prototype, even if it's an internal prototype, goes a very long way on that sort of communication.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Libby, do you want to ask the next one?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I was so caught up in the chat. If you are able to hop in the chat and help Giselle answer her question, which was kind of for the group, that would be great. There's a great conversation happening in the chat around degrees and school and whether you need a degree in data to work in data. But Lindsay asked
I do not have, by the way.
Well, yeah, that's a great point. Michael, what are your degrees in?
I have a bachelor's in chemical engineering.
Okay. Yeah.
And a concentration, which is like a minor in material science, but no grad school and no formal data science related degrees for me.
Yep. And yet here you are. Sometimes if
Yep.
you stay open to stuff, You go in that direction. Well, we had a question earlier from Lindsay, and it's got an asterisk, so I'm going to ask it. And it's, how would you quantify the value that learning R has brought to your work? And I'm guessing quantify is like hours saved or.
Yeah. Quantifying value of any sort of digital tool has been a major struggle for all of us, because a lot of times it's in time saved doing a task. And then the real question is, would you have even bothered to spend that time doing that task if you didn't have the programming tool? So one of the biggest compliments I think that I can give R is that I have built, like run a number of calculations that we just wouldn't have attempted if I didn't have a programming tool. And so like I can answer questions that we just would have said, we can't do that. Now, what number value can I put on those? That's really hard. And in terms of time saved on something, that also gets messy. When you're communicating to stakeholders, if you say, well, I saved so and so, I saved this group of whatever, a dozen people 2 hours a week each, and they say, oh, that's great. Does that mean that we can have one fewer person in our group? Well, that's not really the answer that I'm looking for. So communication around value there is always a challenge. But if you can save some of the tedious steps, and answer that's a good thing. If you can answer questions that you just would not have been able to answer in the past because you would have given up first, that's even more value. But putting a number on it is not something that I've found a good solution to.
Thank you. That's really valuable. Roberto asked a question a bit earlier with a little star next to it, so I'll read it. But it was, how did you overcome the imposter syndrome whenever you couldn't figure out how to code or solve something? I feel like it's a shared feeling for anyone who learns a new programming language.
Yeah. So fortunately, I was definitely not the first person learning R at Dow, and there were some other people like Tony and James, I know is here, and others who are very friendly and open to consult on things. And one of the things that I think all of us have learned is that if you've got a group of people who are all working in the same space, if you've got a new person who asks a question, a more experienced person might be able to answer that question, but might not have necessarily known that answer directly. It's like I'm 90% sure that the answer is this. Let's try it. Yep, it worked. That's cool. I had never thought about it that way. So I've learned a ton of stuff from the other broader DAO community in this area, but I think I've been able to share quite a few things that they've learned from me as well, because I'm asking slightly different questions than they had asked in the past. So once you start to realize, like if you have more experienced people who are very willing to say, I think it's this, but I've never tried it before, that quickly gets you out of the imposter area, because you know that this is not a stupid question. I'm doing something that's kind of new and unusual, and that happens very quickly. The other thing that I've encountered is that there's a huge amount of information online for all these programming languages where you can ask a question in some way and it might give you an answer. That goes a long way. Convincing people that they're going to get somewhere by Googling it is huge. So with one of the recent Posit Academy groups that I was working with, one of my favorite moments in that was somebody had a question where they wanted to make a plot on a log scale instead of a linear scale. And I said, I want you to share your screen. We're all here. We've got 5 minutes left in class. I want you to just type something in your search engine in the terminology that you would use for figuring this out, and open up a page and see if it gives you the right command or the right function to use here. Let's go. Let's try it. And she Googled something and she found a ggplot function of, I don't know, scale x log or logarithmic or something like that, that accomplished what she wanted to do. And it was there, like, it was new to everybody in the group. Like, I had seen it, but it was new to everyone in the group. And it was, I'm going to make you Google this and you're going to find it and you're going to get that answer. And the confidence that you can do that. And even if it breaks, it wasted 30 seconds of it crashing once. I can go Google this again, try something else. That goes a very long way as well. It's a lot easier to run tests on code, especially if you're just doing something like modifying the graph, than it is to run a new reaction in lab that may take you hours or days or whatever it is. And the difference in time there is something that takes a lot of scientists some practice to get used to.
Definitely. And on this topic of training and working with other people, I know there's so many different community initiatives at Dow, and we've had your team on before to talk about those. So I want to make sure I share the link to that Hangout recording as well. But a real quick question, Bill had asked, where is your physical or virtual physical location, and are you in touch day to day with bench scientists?
So yes, I sit in Midland, Michigan, which is the headquarters of Dow. And I'm still located in a building that's full of experimentalists, lots of lab space and stuff in this building. Now, most of my meetings are with people who are not necessarily physically in the same building and so forth. Some of them are in Midland, some of them are in Texas, some of them are in Pennsylvania, some of them are elsewhere. But I still go to the office and I'm on site more often than not. And I find that sort of in-person interaction of just talking with somebody in the hallway, talking to somebody in the break area, the lunch area, whatever, to be extremely valuable, so that I get the ideas about what frustrations people are running into with their own data and the types of things that they might want to answer. So a lot of the tasks that I can do from home, but that sort of personal interaction is still really valuable to me.
Yeah. I see Alan had asked a question. I was just about to call him in, but I think he had to drop for a meeting. But he said, given Dow's size, what's the balance between local, nimble adoption of tools and programs like Academy and the need for broader organization standard setting enterprise support? What has made scaling up your program successful in a big org?
Yeah, it's a hard balance. One of the things is that, yes, Dow is huge. The R&D data science community within Dow is a lot smaller. It's still a lot of people, but it's a much more manageable number of people. And so when you start trying to compartmentalize things that way, it's a lot easier to get in touch with the right sets of people from the leadership side of things to say, this is what I want to do. I think this might be a good way to handle it. I think that other people in these other organizations are going to have similar interests. What do you think about this? And we haven't had a huge number of issues that I've had to deal with on that front. There's other people who have been on the administration side of all of our Posit tools, and I think things have gone well there, or at least they've kept me from having to worry about it, which is very fortunate. Now, like I said, whenever you're crossing functions or crossing sort of spaces that people work in, If we want something to go on our external facing website, then that's different groups of people who have to be involved and so forth. If we have data sets that are owned by the manufacturing organization instead of the research and development organization, that's a different set of permissions to get access to all of that data. And for the most part, people are understanding if you give them a business case of why you need something, it's at that point, it's a question of how much work is it going to take my organization to make that possible? How much time is it going to be for us to give you the right permissions to this data? Maybe that's fast. How much time is it going to be to put this on some site? Maybe that's slower. Or sometimes you run into security questions as well, as was already asked about, of are we okay with somebody in this place having access to this data? Maybe yes, maybe no. But once you have a clear case of why you're trying to do something, and you can sort of narrow down the scope to who's going to care and who's going to have access to it, the communication's usually gone pretty smoothly for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. I wanted to talk a little bit about success in learning, because I feel like you have done really, really well. And it seems like a lot of people at Dow have had a lot of success in learning from Academy, or in the communities of learning that you've built internally. So I was kind of wondering what the recipe for success is. Like, what is it that the managers at Dow are doing to help people have that higher probability of success in Academy or in just learning in general?
So I think that in my experience, Dow has always had a good willingness to let people learn new skills and desire for people to learn new skills. With Academy itself, I think one of the things that we've learned there is that making sure that before somebody even starts going through Academy, that we've been in touch with their management chain and got explicit approval that yes, we will set aside time for so-and-so to have enough available bandwidth to work on all the lessons and things in Academy. That goes a long way. And then the other thing is, the faster that you can work with your own data and get some benefit out of it, the better. So it's more motivating to you, and it's more motivating to your management if 3 weeks into Academy you say, I just took this Excel file that I get on a daily basis out of some instrument, and I turned it into this graph that I have to make every time, and it was faster. All of a sudden, we're like, okay, so you set aside this time for me to work on this class, and I'm still going to need that time. But now one of the other things that I was doing on a daily basis, I don't have to do anymore. People quickly start to see the value there, and it's exciting for both the leadership and the students. And that's a really valuable milestone when people hit that. So we've had good support, but making sure that we're upfront with the communication and upfront with the approvals and so forth is really important, to make sure that people don't get pulled away into some other responsibilities of a different training program, into a different job responsibility that pops up, into whatever. We've had people get pulled away into recruiting responsibilities sometimes in the past, where they're busy with interviews and with talking to candidates and reading resumes and so forth, where that pops up a couple times a year, but is not a steady thing over the whole year. And so all of a sudden, a chunk of their time vanishes that maybe they were planning to allocate towards Academy and can't anymore.
Michael, did you think an hour could go by so fast?
It flew through.
There was a Slido question, which I think is a nice ending question, which is, What's the next big thing regarding anything you do with data? What are you most excited about for the future?
Oh, geez, that's a big question. Um, so, man, that's a hard question as well. I think that the next big thing is a lot of times with getting more people aware of what's possible with the programming tools. Not necessarily teaching them all the programming tools, but saying, if people can come in and say, here's this concept that I have, I think it might be easy to somebody who knows R or somebody who knows Python or whatever it is, and actually being mostly correct on that assessment, even if they don't know the programming stuff, that's a huge step forward. And so trying to put out more broadly useful examples of these things and advertising them to the organization and say, here's a couple examples of something that we've been doing recently. You might like some of these, but let us know if you have other ideas of something that might fall into the same realm, that might look similar, that sort of stuff. Come talk to us, and it might be really fast to accomplish. I think that's a big goal for everyone in the data science world, to have the right communication with the non-programmers out there who have a lot of great ideas, and the faster you can filter those down to the ones that are good for computers and the ones that are not as friendly for computers to work on, the easier your job becomes.
Well, thank you so much, Michael, for joining us today and to share your experience. And I'm so glad to hear how this experience with Academy has gone for you. But just so happy to have so many people from the DAO team here today as well. I want to echo what Steve just put into the chat, where he said one major factor that has driven this movement has also been having the passionate people who consistently advocate for these changes. So I've worked with, I know, Tony and James and Camilla and Alex and Amanda, and I just really appreciate you and everything that y'all do. So thank you so much, Michael.
Thank
And
you.
I think there were some questions that I know we didn't get to, and I'm really sorry. I will try and grab those and share them with you, Michael, if that's okay.
Sure. Feel free.
All right. Well, have a great rest of the day, everybody.